All right, good morning. My name is Meredith. I'm a parenting educator with Parenting Now, and we're here this morning to talk about temperament. We'll be talking about the ways that we can tune into our child's temperament and think about our own, and all the ways that this can help us find the best way to support them and to support ourselves. And so just to get started, some Zoom housekeeping. We have our participants' videos off and we have everyone muted. At the end, when we have time to ask questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself, or you can type questions into the chat box at any point as we're going through. We are recording this session, and so it will be posted after the fact. Again, I'm Meredith, and this morning I have Sarah with me. Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Sarah. I am the program manager for our first 3 years program here at Parenting Now, and have been in the field of parenting education for about 6 years. And I'm really excited to talk temperament, one of my favorite topics.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's a fun one. And it's something that I wanted us to talk about in our virtual parenting sessions, because just looking back, in my own life over the last 6 months, I've noticed some really big differences in the way that I and other people have all reacted to the many, many changes that we've seen. And I'm sure that for parents who are listening, that's something that they've maybe noticed as well. Different people react differently to all the different curveballs that life throws at us. And there's been a lot for most of us the last 6 months in our personal lives, in our day-to-day routines, in the world as a whole. There's just a lot that's new and different. And so, yeah, as we said, temperament's a big part of that. And, many people are preparing for more upcoming changes as we get ready for a new school year. And so I wanted us to spend a little time thinking about how each of us reacts, what our temperament brings, and how we can make sure that everyone in the family has the support that they need for new changes to come. So what is temperament? Temperament describes the tendencies and the traits that we have that make up our personalities. And those are what govern all the different ways that we interact with the world. And so different researchers have different labels that they put on them. And so if you look it up, you might see different labels in different places, but they all describe generally the same things. And there's 3 that we're going to focus on today. And so I'll share my screen real quick just to give people a chance to see the ones that we're going to focus on. And so we'll be talking about emotional intensity today, adaptability, and sensory reactivity. And I wanted to highlight emotional intensity because there's a huge range in how each of us reacts. There are people who are more easygoing and folks who tend to have big reactions to whatever the situation is. And that can be true, for our children and for ourselves. And so just thinking about that, just knowing the kind of emotional intensity that our children bring that are part of who they are, can help us feel more prepared. It sometimes really catches us off guard and can make us have a bigger reaction when their reaction seems to come out of nowhere. When all of a sudden there's this huge wave of big feelings, it can catch us off guard and make us a little bit more reactive. So Sarah, with that in mind, knowing that our child might have some really big feelings going on, that they might need a little extra support in that department, what are some ways that we can help those kiddos out?
Great question. Yes, and we might also be having some bigger reactions than in the current time. So this may or may not be a surprise to parents, but our number 1 tool in our pocket is taking care of ourselves. So we always say self-care, we take care of ourselves not in spite of being parents, but because we are parents. In order to respond to our children the way we'd like, we have to have some reserves. We have to be cared for as well. And we're not talking about getting pedicures and that such thing, although that can certainly be something. But thinking through, especially in times like these, whether it's just asking for some alone time, whether it's finding a way to connect with a friend, it's important that parents are filling their cups. You can think of it like a bank account. So when you take care of yourself, you're making deposits. And then hopefully you've deposited enough that when you have to make a big withdrawal, let's say you have a morning that's just really challenging with some really big feelings, coming from your kiddo, you won't be left depleted if you've padded yourself a bit with your self-care. So that's the first piece of wisdom that we often help parents begin to pull into their lives. It can feel really hard, and I'm sure even now it's even more challenging. We have to get creative around how we find our self-care. So let's say we've gotten that taken care of. What Meredith is talking about on all these different temperament tendencies, we want to remember that either side of the spectrum isn't good or bad, right? A big reaction isn't better than an easygoing reaction. It's literally what we're born with. So big feelings are just that, big feelings. They're real for your kiddo. It's a part of who they are and how they react. And so just like any feelings, we can use our emotion coaching skills. I'm pretty sure you did an emotion coaching virtual parenting session. Yes, so you can go back and look at that one if you haven't seen it. The very basics of emotion coaching are validating and recognizing those feelings. Wow, you are really upset about this. And then the second part is problem solving for your kiddo. Think of yourself like a coach, right? What are some things I'm going to help guide you in to navigate those feelings in a better way? My dog is scratching my door. So excuse that. And so lastly, we want to remember too that so often it can feel like we should teach those skills when the upset is happening, because that's when it's in our faces and we're thinking we have to do something about this. And that actually isn't a great time for us to be teaching skills to our kiddos. We want to wait until everyone's calm, and then your kiddo is more open to learning some skills. You can practice things like even just reading a book and identifying feelings of the characters, or making a place in your house where people can go when they have big feelings. Maybe it's a cozy, soft place to calm down, or maybe it's a place where they get to stomp and scribble with crayons. Each family will be different, and you can decide for yourself what feels good and what you want to teach your child to do with those big feelings.
That's great. And I really love that you brought up the point that there isn't a good or bad side of the spectrum. That it's not like easygoing is what we want our children to be. We of course want them to build the skills to be able to manage emotional intensity, but there's nothing wrong with big reactions. If we think about, the words that we have for that, there's all the negative connotations, but then there's all the positive connotations, all the positive labels that we have, like passionate and exciting. Those are people who we want in our lives. And, so it can, of course, be challenging sometimes to be parenting someone with a lot of feelings and big reactions. That can be hard for us. And especially if, as a parent, we ourselves are really reactive, there can be a lot of bouncing off of each other, but there's nothing wrong with that at all.
It's information, so that, for example, if you are the parent of an intense or big feeling or big reactor child, you're going to need some extra self-care.
Yeah.
And that's okay to acknowledge that and use that as information to help your family navigate.
Yeah, it's just like any other information. If we were, if we knew we were going outside and it was going to be bright and sunny, we would be prepared with, extra water, maybe some cool snacks, a sun hat or some sunscreen. If it was really cold out, we would be prepared with all the things for that. Yeah, we just take in information and we prepare ourselves accordingly. And all these different aspects of temperament all help us know how to prepare. That's a great way to put it. So let's talk a little bit about adaptability. And I'll share the screen again real quick. And so there's people out there, there's those of us who are slower to warm, who need a little bit of time to ease into a situation, whether it's being in a new place or meeting new people. And there's those who are just ready to jump in right away, who join really easily and who really thrive on newness and novelty. And so knowing that, with that in mind, and thinking about all of the newness that's been brought to all of us, I'm sure that, for many of us, we can notice who in our family and our friend group are the more adaptable ones, who are the ones who are like, yeah, this is great. I'm going to you know, take up knitting and sourdough making. And, you know, there's all those people who are making the most of all the newness. And then there's those of us who are struggling a bit with just trying to maintain some normalcy and some sense of routine and life as it was before. So thinking about that, Sarah, what does that look like now when there's so much that's new? And as we're preparing for a new school year, whatever that looks like for your family, how do we comfort our children and ourselves, you know, if we're someone who needs a little bit more time to ease in and we don't feel like we can take that?
Yeah, great question. And also I want to say before, similar to how we talked about there's no good or bad, there is sort of a cultural, there's some stigma, right, around being slow to warm or shy, or, and so we can sometimes get caught up in thinking that it's bad or it's a negative quality. And of course, being slow to warm has some wonderful positives, you know, being thoughtful and observant, and then being more likely to join in also has some wonderful positives. So, you know, similar to how what we've already talked about, children who are slow to warm, that's what's happening. That's true and real for them. They often need extra support and attention. And sometimes parents can feel worried that this means they won't catch up or they're never going to join in or that sort of thing, which is really normal for you to feel concerned about. However, it is simply not true that by giving them that extra attention and support, we're actually helping them build a safety net that will make them more willing to venture out when they're ready, and practice some of those skills. And I want to add, everything right now is amplified as we're facing this new situation. And there's so many different responses that we're all having, and each of our temperamental qualities might be amplified as well. So if you have a slow to warm child, there's a lot of change right now. And so it would make a lot of sense that they would need even extra love and support and care. We can't go wrong with staying connected with our kiddos. Having that connection and responsiveness, keeping that safety in our relationship, can help us all navigate that a turbulent time where a lot of us don't really know exactly what's on the horizon. You can think of these skills or these tendencies like a muscle. So a slow to warm child doesn't have a strong try new things muscle because they prefer to hang back or play alone, or watch. And so they might need to build their try new things muscle. And we can, as parents, we can think about how we can support them in that. So I was thinking about what might a slow to warm child be struggling with during COVID, and it might be having to communicate with family members or friends through FaceTime or through digitally. And I don't know about you, Meredith, but I've had lots of experience with kiddos who just, it's not easy. They either want to make faces at themselves or they don't want to engage. And so if you're trying to foster a relationship, say with a grandparent, you know, we can lower our expectations and do some practice first. We could set our kids up for success by not expecting them to talk right away, and they just get to sit on a parent's lap and listen while you visit. Or maybe the grandparents do something that's really low key and doesn't involve a lot of putting the kiddo on the spot. Maybe they're just going to read a book out loud, and that's it. So setting some realistic expectations and then allowing your kiddo time to practice. For a little bit older kiddos, role play is super fun. And you can pretend to be the grandparent and you can let them pretend to be the grandparent, so that they can feel a little bit more empowered about a new situation.
Yeah, that's great. And it's even, we can even use role play, you know, as you said, with older children who are, you know, interacting with peers this way. And so that would be a really fun way for them to, you know, get to be their friend, or you get to be the friend, and they can practice ways that they would talk, because yeah, it is such a weird new world. And that's a big question on so many parents' minds, and one that's come up, you know, in previous sessions, is just how we're supporting social development and how
Absolutely.
helping them to continue to build strong relationships, even when they have to do it through this funny little box.
Right. Yeah. And we as parents are adapting to those skills. It doesn't end with toddlerhood. And I spent some time practicing what to say in a text to her friends with my 13-year-old, right? This is how they are communicating with friends right now. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, those are really sweet ways to help build that a little bit. And again, I love that you mentioned that, yeah, both sides are really wonderful and have their own challenges that come with them. You know, the children who jump in right away sometimes need to build that muscle of slowing, pumping the brakes a little bit, you know, stepping back before they dive into the pool, you know, making sure that the water's deep enough that it's not filled with crocodiles or something, you know. It's a little caution is not a bad thing.
Waiting to pet the dog until we make
Yeah.
sure that it's safe.
Yeah,
Right.
all sorts of good things. Yeah, yeah. So just again, we want parents to always remember that that all are good, and there's just different muscles that we build. So moving on now to the last one I wanted to focus on, which is sensory input. So all of us have our own threshold of what's too much for us, and every person on the planet gets overwhelmed at some points, and just what that threshold is varies so much from person to person, and it can vary a lot moment to moment for us, just based on sort of how stressed we are, you know, what level we're kind of simmering at, just on a day, you know, on a day-to-day basis. And so sensory input can be, you know, the amount of noise, just the amount of any kind of stimulation, light, pressure, temperature, all of that stuff impacts us all differently. And so there's children, there's adults who thrive with lots going on and who get a lot of energy from that, and, you know, just really thrive with lots of stimulation. And then there are folks who need a little bit more quiet and some calm and more time to decompress and self-regulate a little bit. And so in families where there might be huge variations in terms of the ideal amount of sensory input, that can be a real challenge. You know, if you have one family member who loves music and loud noise and all these things happening all the time and really needs that, you know, to feel comfortable, and you have another family member who really needs it quiet and calm and low key, how do you do that? So Sarah, how do you make that work when everyone's kind of stuck in one space together and trying to... Oh, I think you're muted.
Thank you.
Yep,
I wish I could say I have a magic wand to make it easy for all of us, and unfortunately I don't. But this is something that all of our families work on, whether we're in the middle of a pandemic or not. And of course, again, we're just taking it up a notch because we are spending a lot of time together all in one space. And so we can use our problem solving skills to, one, when they're little, babies and infants and ones and sometimes twos, we can model for them by how we're interacting with the other adults in our home, how we solve a problem. And so one thing that happens that can easily sort of spiral us into something that's not productive is when we blame another person. Well, if you didn't have your music so loud, then I wouldn't have to such and such. Very normal, and we've all done it. And what I'd like to encourage us all to do is to think of yourself and the other people in your home on the same side, and then the other side, or the thing that you're sort of against, is the problem. So you're working together to address the problem versus just exchanging blame. And as we've talked about through this entire session, we all have our unique needs. Not one is better than the other. It's perfectly valid for a person to need to play some loud music and dance around the kitchen as it is for a person who needs the door shut and the blinds closed and some headphones on. So I'm going to put up a slide as well. We're going to just talk about, I'm just going to go through a very, very quick set of instructions that you could use for problem solving. So like I said, it helps to sort of define the problem first and define that the problem is separate from the people, right? We're not making the people the problem. Right now, a lot of us have a really big problem, and that is COVID. So how can we work together with this new way that we have to be together in our homes? Being able for each party to say what you want and invite participation from the other person. Some people want to solve a problem right away and need to talk about it right now, and some people need time to think about it and reflect before they're ready to have a conversation. So having open communication around how you're going to problem solve will help both or more than one party be open to brainstorming. So once you've established sort of what the things are, I need to have some time every day where I can just zone out with my loud music, you know, and I need some time where I get to see my friends over FaceTime. So you can brainstorm a bunch of solutions. And this is why I say, I wish I had a magic wand. And as parenting educators, we often feel this way when we're asked questions from parents, and the reason we don't have the answer is because each family is unique. So you as a family will be able to brainstorm what would work in your home. So you'll want to pick one of your solutions and try it out and come back, set a time to come back and check in about how it was working. This is not a quick fix. And although you could strike on the first brainstorming solution and find that it works really well, and I can see how it'd be frustrating for us to kind of have to enact this set of steps, you know, several times to kind of find what works. However, this is a big investment that you're making in your family by modeling this for your children, by giving them an opportunity to be a part of the problem solving, by modeling for them that each of our temperaments and needs and wants are valid and that we can find a way to problem solve, all of us having and getting what we need and want in some way or another. And I will.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah. That's a really helpful model for solving all sorts of problems. But it's definitely helpful as we're figuring out just how to make sure that each family member has the support that they need to really thrive with everything going on right now. You know, our goal isn't necessarily, you know, our first goal is to survive the day, right? To make it to the end of the day with everyone still hanging in there. But we really hope that families are able to find a way to also find joy and connection with each other and to really make lemonade out of the lemons that are floating around for all of us. So we want to open up the floor for some questions. And again, you're welcome to type them into the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask that way. Either way is fine. And Sarah and I will just sort of sit quietly for a minute. And if there aren't any questions that pop up right away, then we'll keep chatting. But people are welcome to ask and to cut us off and jump in at any time at this point. And we're also happy to answer questions that are related to parenting, but not directly this topic. So feel free to jump in with those as well. So with the problem solving steps, are there good ways to say what you want, such as phrases to start the conversation? That's a great question. Do you want to tackle that, Sarah?
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. One thing to think about, again, like we were talking about, is to use I statements, right? And to talk about what's happening for you versus you always leave your socks on the floor and it drives me nuts. You could use an I statement like, I feel so much better when the house is tidier. Would you be willing to talk to me about ways we could make that happen? We want to keep the lines of communication open, and so we want to be gentle. The Gottmans are a wonderful couple, Dr. John Gottman, who's done a lot of research into partnerships. And I believe they call it a soft opening, or a soft, you want to go in gently, right? And sort of lay the groundwork. So using your own experience and your own words without blaming the other, and just clearly stating what you'd like. And so hopefully that example helps a little bit. I don't know if you have anything to add, Meredith.
No, I think that's great. I think that, you know, it can vary depending on, if we're talking to a partner or if we're talking to a child. And so sometimes, especially with children or with younger people, it can be helpful to, to also share just something that is going well, sort of the sandwich idea, right? Of like the good and then the rough part and then the bad. And so, oh, I really, like if you were talking to your child, and they were leaving their socks all over the house and it was driving you bonkers. I noticed that you've been helping a lot with your younger brother and, with keeping him busy. And I really appreciate that. I've noticed that, the house is looking pretty messy. Let's take a look together. And, oh, there's socks all over the floor. What could we do about this? And so, the steps would vary, the phrasing would vary a little bit just based on the age of the person you're talking to. We don't want to talk to our partners the way we would talk to our children necessarily. But with children, when we're problem solving with them, or when they're doing something that, really catches us off guard. I love the phrase, get curious, not furious. Anytime that we're asking questions, we're engaging a different part of our brain that actually helps us stay a little bit calmer. And this means really asking questions, not the, what were you thinking? That's not the calmer thinking part of our brain. That's just a reaction. But, oh, what's going on here? That helps us stay calmer again. And it also helps us to just engage with them and connect. And like Sarah mentioned before, this is really a time to be gentle with our kiddos, gentle with ourselves, and really focus on how we can connect with the people in our families.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that can be helpful, and I'm seeing, yes.
Yeah. With tones of voice giving different meanings to what I say. Oof. Yeah, that is tough. And actually, my son, who's just about to turn 4, has started, there's a particular tone that I use. So even as a parenting educator, I will just say that Sarah and I are not perfect at all of the things that we can give the advice. But yeah, there's a tone that I think is not, anyway, yeah, my son says, you're yelling at me. And I'm like, no, I'm just annoyed. That's just my annoyed voice. It's actually very quiet. So tone is tough. It might take practicing out of the moment. And if there's another adult who can practice this with you, you can kind of go back and forth. This is something we do in our groups sometimes, where we have parents practice saying things to each other in different tones of voice, and just hearing it can be helpful, just so that you're able to recognize it. Or if you know that it often comes up, when you're annoyed or frustrated, if there's tones that come out then just seeing if you can catch it a little bit before and take a breath. Do just, a 2-second self-care of a deep breath in and out. Sarah, is there anything that you want to add?
I was just going to say what you were saying, and that is, I'm not sure exactly if this is what you're asking, but often our tone of voice changes based on our own level of emotion. And so back to that self-care and, picking a time when you feel calm and you feel, connected with the people in your family, and knowing so much of this is about picking the right time, right? And knowing if I'm just at my wit's end, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm feeling short fused, it's okay to not problem solve during that time. That's a wise choice to make. And so that could be a part of it too. I like your idea, even just before doing a couple deep breaths, or picturing something that you really like about the person or love, or something that's really positive to help put you in that mind frame. where it might come across more gently. But yes, Meredith is correct. My children used to call me dangerous mommy. And we are a very slow to warm and quiet family, so they really haven't heard much yelling, but they would call me dangerous mommy because to them, whatever it was, the look in my eye, or they could sense the tension in my body, you know, they were interpreting it and taking it to heart.
Yeah, we had a similar comment as well from a parent that her daughter says she doesn't like when she uses that voice. Typically it comes when she hasn't done what's been asked and after the third time of being asked, which, yeah, of course, by the third time, your annoyance level is probably risen a bit. There's a great quote that the best time to say no is, oh gosh, I'm forgetting it now, but basically before you're frustrated, before you're angry. And so, you know, if you know that the angry, you know, that voice, the dangerous mommy voice comes, you know, the third time being asked, then maybe after asking the second time, you know, sort of committing to walking over, you know, getting down at their level, making eye contact, or maybe if your child really enjoys silliness, doing it in a silly way, you know, we can kind of create new routines around the way that we're giving requests. And sometimes that breaks it up a little bit.
And that's such a great point because often we feel like we need to use that voice, which is also really normal because we are sent the message from our culture that we're supposed to make our kids behave. And so we think maybe that we need to use that voice so that they'll take us seriously, or we can't let them get away with certain things, all of which are really understandable in our role as parents. And Meredith and I are here to grant you permission to make it fun. I love that. You can make it silly, guiding their behavior using fun and games and creativity, or you know, that sort of thing is teaching them, is guiding them, is discipline, even though in our culture we kind of have this one way that we think of it, like, you will pay attention to me. Sometimes for little people, even just changing the volume, so a little whisper can be really exciting. Or every once in a while, I've had parents who've talked about, like, when they're just feeling frustrated, they just let out something like a silly sound with the kiddos, like, ah! You know, so that everybody kind of laughs, but it gives you that chance to let off some pressure, let off that steam before you engage. So yeah, we invite you to be silly.
And to also give yourself some compassion as well, because yeah, we all are going to have moments when we use that parenting voice, and anyone who has been a teacher knows that there's like the teacher voice and the teacher look that, you know, gets children to kind of fall in line. And so knowing that, you know, we're going to have moments when we have feelings, when we feel frustrated, and that's fine. And if there's ever, you know, a big blow up, or even just a small, you know, conflict with our children, we can always, after we both calm down, connect with them after and model what it looks like to apologize, to talk about our own frustrations. You know, yeah, I was feeling pretty angry earlier because, you know, I told you I really needed you to help with that. And, you know, I had asked you for help and you were drawing on the walls instead, or whatever the situation was. We're going to go ahead and wrap up unless there's any last questions from anyone. And Sarah, is there anything else that you want to share before we finish off for today?
I think I just want to send a big warm hug to all parents right now, and especially parents with young children. This is really, really tough. And like Meredith said, step one is having a lot of compassion and grace with yourself right now. You are parenting in a harder way than many people have had to parent before you. And so, yeah, I think every day taking some time to acknowledge that it's hard and that you deserve some love and care and gentleness and a little bit of wiggle room of not being perfect, because this is a really challenging time.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, thank you all so much.
Yes, thank
Have a
you.
wonderful day.